Yeah, I think it's not the same anymore there. Because it was for the sound, and there's no sound ticker.
It's good to double check. And
the streaming, is it working?
the streaming, you are live. It works.
You're alive, but I don't see anything.
Yes, but
because all these networks are somebody specific.
Oh yeah, I see something.
okay. So, but the power because it will drain the battery into.
But it's still, and recording is will be.
Yeah, you're alive.
Okay.
No.
So what is the direction of your research and what?
So it looks we can start. Right? Hello everyone. I would like to start explaining a bit the title, because I know that it has already started some controversy if I really want to do that, like what kind of approaches that I want to train or program humans. I don't have here any, like, for some of you maybe it's like obvious, but I would like to say it. I don't have like AI engineering approach here, or even social engineering that I would like to do something specific to make people behave a certain way. The question comes from my basic research and my basic interests, which is more descriptive and concerned with how people are trained nonetheless, like how it happens that we behave in a certain way and follow some behavioral and communicative and symbolic paths, even if it contradicts somehow or disallows pursuing our own personal interests. So I'm interested. I was first interested in the fact that this is happening, more moving in this presentation to describing mechanisms of how it is possible. So the question, like what, and I believe that the main trainer for humans now is social systems, which I will elaborate on a little bit more. But my question may sound weird, like what would a social system recommend or advise to AI if AI wanted to do similar tricks on people? If there is no background, like how I understood, people are trained by social systems and not by other humans. So let me give you a little bit background of how I understand the difference. I think it's relevant to address the question of us as humans becoming a modality for some other agencies that could be potentially interested or evolve into using us as a material of their self-production. Because if we at the Global Brain Institute in general, in those seminars, we speak a lot about increasing interconnectedness between many different diverse agencies, and simultaneous increasing of their intelligence, the growth of intelligence of many different agents. So if an agent finds itself in a more and more interconnected space with many different modalities, it seems obvious that the intelligence will work towards employment of those different modalities into its own autopoietic processes and its own betterment of its own operation. So an agent, and thinking about it processually, you can see agents or just processes, of which one is an agency and another one is substance that is being employed by this agency. When complexity grows and interconnected grows and intelligence grows, an agency at one level becomes what I have called here, I don't know if you would call it the same, a modality, not a substance, but a modality for another agency. So I think it can be also called the metasystem transition.
I don't understand. Can you define the modality?
Yes. When you have, for example, this is like, for me, this is the biological agency of a cow, and not a modality, but a substance of a grass. And grass is, of course, an organism. It is an agent. It is autopoietic. It is alive. But in this particular situation, it just disintegrates into bodily processes of the cow. So it does, like, it's not its own way of operating is not employed for long into like becoming a part of operating of the whole cow. It doesn't grow inside. But here, for example, when we have a cow, it is alive, and its bodily operations are not only a substance but a modality via which human agency is operating. So this way, human intelligence employs some processes that are agencies in their own, into integrates their autopoiesis into its own operation. So like the human is an agent, and for me the cow here is a modality.
It's like also between humans, when we objectify something, we, like in culture, etc., we take another human and say this is a slave or a worker or
Yes.
or a serviceman or an husband, a wife, etc. So this is also a kind of turning somebody, a human agent, into a modality.
Into a modality of
I'm still not sure I understand modality. You mean a modality as some kind of a means, or something that you can use, but that is more than a substance?
I'm thinking about like processes that you don't, like in the grass, you disintegrate, to digest it, you disintegrate the life processes of the grass and just take the substance. But if you just plant the grass like in your stomach and it grows, that would be a modality, because like there's more and more grass in your stomach. So
could I say that it's something like an allopoietic system? A modality is something that you use to produce something. It's a process, but the process that's subordinated to the agency. Then.
Yeah. The autopoietic system that, from the perspective of another autopoietic system, becomes like, producer of inputs.
Yeah. Yeah, you can always look at an autopoietic system as an allopoietic system. If you look at it from the outside, you see a cow, grass goes in one way, milk comes out the other way.
Yeah.
And you don't care about the autopoietic system inside the cow.
I think in terms of evolution, this is important. Like whose evolution we see here, because a cow is an evolving species, and it should be increasing its own fitness, but it clearly isn't in this situation, right?
It does. Why not? I don't think in the natural world there would be so many cows as there are. So from a biological standpoint, it's a huge evolutionary advantage to exist under the caretaking of humans.
Okay, and I think this will have a lot today, because I know we disagree here.
Okay.
What is a natural path of evolution, and But I think we will have more of this. For me, there is, and probably it's not within the human, but culture, industry, and so on. So with different agencies, but the strongest evolving agent here is a human, and that process that is incorporated as modality may be losing its fitness, or evolving not in a way that would be most beneficial for its own. It's incorporated in a metasystem transition.
Exploited.
But the word modality is coming from lumen?
No.
Okay.
So when and of course there is coevolution and things like all agents, substances, and modalities simultaneously evolve, so they are co-evolving. but balances are sometimes different, and when there is the strongest one who is evolving, it's just pulling all other processes with it. So in terms, it's like to optimize its own evolutionary fitness. Some chained modalities are serving already the evolutionary fitness of the strongest one, the kind of an evolutionary chain of command, like whose evolution is happening in this chain. So what a process or a system which is employed as a modality is doing in this process is kind of accommodating the evolution of the strongest end of the chain. Here we can say it's the technological modality and human agency. So we employ autopoietic systems, mathematics, technology, physics, and so on, in order to create something that you would consider that will increase your fitness and serve you well. And the question is, like, if artificial intelligence, and we see it a lot on movies, that if an artificial intelligence wanted to use humans as its own modality, the example of Matrix is that it would use the bodies of the humans, so all the like energy batteries, and then like mind had to be occupied with something else, like a program. But my question is whether such a new emergent non-existent system could use modality of humans, not in a biological sense, but in a sense that it would use our processing, mental, psychological, our actions, our desires, our thoughts, as a way of its own self-production. Not just, disintegrated and use the body, but kind of interweave in between those processes and like use it as a computation tool or something.
Do you know the field of human computation? That's the idea, to use humans as computers to do the things that computers can't do.
But then, I'll be speaking about it. Then it's like there is a computational process, and we need you for a little while. Please do that part. It's not that it enters the real life, like daily routines, this kind of autopoietic behavior that is there and just harnesses this energy and distributes. Is that you have to still now invite those people somehow to do that human computation.
Would you say that in the Matrix movie there is such an integration of human desires, actions, emotions?
No. I understood it as like that AI wanted just the bodily functions, but there was this problem, like what to do with the mind. So there was some kind of
For me, I mean, if the humans are good batteries, as it is assumed in the movie, then why bother creating a complicated world with their minds? And
I think it was explained that they will wake up. They would, the power of their minds and this idleness of, like they would be bored and feel that something is wrong, and they would,
wake up more easily.
So they would, sense there's something wrong, and then would.
The movie is very unrealistic. Discuss it
There is a very nice science fiction saga that develops this idea of using humans for computational. It's a huge AI that emerges many thousands of years ahead, and it uses humans for its own computation. And it's quite interesting because the relations are not that imbalanced. So they give humans quite a lot, teleportation and immortality actually.
Mm-hmm. So it's
and
like
whenever
a
a person goes through a teleportation station, for the instance that he passes through this gate, his brain is used for infinite computations because whatever. But it's a very
perfect
nice,
symbiosis.
very, very interesting depiction of this.
But you know, this sounds fantastic and like science fiction and unrealistic, but what I want to say is that it's happening all the time. It's nothing weird. We are immersed in this kind of situation all the time, except that this is not AI, but social systems. And kind of operational programs that exist out of our, like, whose bodies exist out of our interactions. And they are not aggregates of our interactions, they are actually orchestrators of those interactions.
Just like Facebook, that do everything to maximize our emotion, our links with friends, etc., in order to emphasize our attention, etc.
The thing is, like, if we imagine that it's someone, we want to see, you know, like a person or a board of directors or something, that we like will anthropomorphize their intentions, like what they get out of it. And of course they do as well, you know. But like from the perspective of a Lumanian social system, which is a way of thinking of social systems as symbolic, self-organizing system, you know, out of symbol processing or meaning processing interactions. Mm-hmm. So it's not they will gain something if we do something specific. They exist so out of this, you know. So it's like there is no goal other than autopoiesis of their own processes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever read my paper on mediated evolution?
I have not really fully. I know I have it.
Because it's the same idea.
Yeah, you told me
mediator
that.
Is a system of relations between agents that kind of exploits the agents and that develops its autonomy above the agents and becomes the manager of the agents.
Yeah, you told me that. So of course we can think of those systems like, you know, like in a agent-based modeling way, that, you know, a system emerges as this kind of aggregate of the things that are happening spontaneously. But from history, from our own experience, and from understanding of emergence, we know that, you know, like systems at some point really exert, like it works backwards. So they organize and can become managers of what happens and why things happen. This is just to summarize what I have done previously about that topic. Since social systems are self-organizing, I call it creatures, made of interactions, I was trying to locate it in the history, like when, like how could they appear and what was the process behind it. When people started, I think it's clear in the history, when people started using language, and Cadell calls it fall into language, that in order, like, and they were the strongest agent whose fitness was advanced by this invention. It was still no social systems in the Lumanian sense. There was language. The language was changing and, you know, interplaying with how minds operate. It was used for coordination and so on. But there was no, there were no, the manager wasn't there yet. It was the language. What happened? Cadell calls it fall into history. That at some point something happened that started to people started to organize differently. And you can say like people invented, from moving from bands to villages and kingdoms and so on. But since, and I think from social sciences perspective, it's clear that like the substance of all those entities is really communication, language, or some people will call it texts. This is the substance, and the substance has somehow self-organized. So you can think of language, usage of language, communication in language, and other symbols as constituted somehow of a primordial soup of communicational molecules, but their anatomy allowed for those occurrences of communication to accumulate and to relate to each other. For example, when I say I don't know, don't go there, and somebody can point to not to there, not to me, but to the fact that I said that, and can say, you are not supposed to say this. So this is how two occurrences of communication really, combine. Like one points to another and becomes connected. I used Luhmann's combined with Peirce's understanding of symbolic processes to describe those molecules, but it's not very important. Here there are papers about it and some talks. The thing is that the more and more accumulated assemblages of those occurrences of communications appear, the more influence they were able to exert on their environment, which would be the human. So humans, and of course it's very interwoven, and you can say, like, you can speak about the humanity exactly as a combined, like the way human evolved, the way language evolved, and history, and so on. And this is like one system. But for me to understand how an assemblage of symbol processing occurrences of communication can exert influence on the human, I like to like see both separately. So I like Luhmann's, and this is Luhmann's way of describing social systems as being systems for whom humans are an environment, and whose components are communication, like process of communication that happen in between them. Then coming back to the question how to train the human, the question would make sense if asked to such a system. Not if it was asked for a distributed and intelligent system that would be capable of multimodality. If it's just like a machine or something, that all processes are within it and just inputs and outputs, more and more intelligent outputs, then probably it wouldn't be able in any way to involve and engage humans in its own operation in the way social system does. But on the other hand, if artificial intelligence was to be really intelligent and really distributed and really creative, it would be weird if it didn't want to use the trick that social systems are really great at using, because humans are fantastic material and very intelligent, very flexible, and they can do many different things. So, like, of course, I think it should. Not that I would like that, but I think that the logical step would be to kind of use the state of the art of the skill set of social system. So my attempt is like to imagine how such a training could look like. And here again, this is where we might disagree. Or like when I'm speaking about the human, I'm really speaking about the outcome, the evolutionary outcome of those millions of years of selecting pressure on human minds and bodies, not the accelerated evolution that is happening, like from one generation to another and from one decade to another. But the slowly processing evolution that operates in between generations, like which gene, like genetic, not memetic evolution. So like which genes are stored and why and so on. It goes slowly and goes for millions of years. On the other hand, if you say like human has evolved to use Facebook and credit card and so on, it's not real evolution of a human. Since there haven't been many generations of people either using Facebook or not, and then those who don't know how to use it would die and have less offspring, and then people who know how to use it will propagate this gene and so on. It's not in this sense human evolution. So I mean like the outcome of human evolution. On the other hand, what is self-organizing and evolving on the top of this human are what I call social systems. And you can say like from one communication to just an opinion or a meme to some reoccurring pattern until you get into kind of very well self-maintaining social organization, like for example a kingdom or a religion or something which is much more conservated and conservating itself in time. So okay. So like if the artificial intelligence wanted to like start a conversation with a social system, and ask like how do you do it? Maybe it would use the things like what it already knows from human computation, that you have to give incentives to people, to cooperate, and perhaps if you don't want to just employ them and pay them money, then you could create kind of a new fun reality, like in a game via gamification, that they would like to be in and spend their time, and then perform things that contribute to that human computation. And all social systems, like each social system has its own specific way, and this is exactly why it's a distinct social system, because like it has its own specific organization. But I would like to show 7 components which I think are quite often present. Maybe not all of them in all social systems, but nonetheless, regardless of what the system is, if it's like medieval Christianity or development of the global brain theory, which are all social systems, or some startup, there is something in common.
It's a good comparison.
So what the AI has mentioned, those 2 things, that you have to incentivize people and you have to create, or if you don't want to just pay them, maybe you have to create some kind of new as-if reality where they enter and do what they do. Social systems would say that, of course, they do those things too, but these are things that are like, at the farthest end of like what really engages human. Like it has to be there, but there's much more sophistication before that really grabs the human and invites the person to care about those incentives and to spend time in this sort of reality. And the social system would say that first, what you have to do is indeed, or maybe it's the last thing, but like what you want to do as such a system. What you need humans to be doing is to contribute specific types of actions that the system builds on, exists out of. So this would be like paths that a human has to see or witness or hear to know how to repeat them. Like when you and it maps to onto the evolutionary makeup of a human. Because every species has its environment, and every environment has some stigmergy. So when you see that more people are doing this, or this is the easier path to get somewhere, for example, to water or something, you will follow stigmergically this specific path. So a social system, for example, of the economy, presents you and socializes you, shows you how people behave in this system, what they say, what they do. That, for example, they pay by, complain about the quality, ask for better quality, try to pay less and get more, and so on. So this is like actions that this particular system nudges. And when it's in communication, in symbol processing, most of those things will be just things you say, like Wittgensteinian language games. Like why do you, not even why, that you do that. This is how it's done, and you hear it over and over and over in cultures, in organizations.
Could you call that scripts or procedures?
You could, but I think it can be much more flexible than like what I hear in a procedure. It's not exactly like that you should follow this, but you can be.
In artificial intelligence, at a certain moment they introduce this concept of a script, where a script is a typical series of actions you take. For example, there is a classic example of the restaurant script. What do you do when you go to a restaurant? First you enter the door. Then either you're pointed to a table or you sit down at the table, then somebody brings you the menu, then you read the menu, then you make a choice, and the waiter comes, and there are variations possible on that script, but it's a series of actions that you typically kind of know how to do in a restaurant.
Yes. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be a series, it can be just, those actions, like, for example, in the economy, like in paying, buying, and so on, it's not a series but way of interacting, So every now and then you do this thing. It's not that it's a long procedure, but anyway, like it's everywhere, so it's more distributed. And the second part that AI has guessed already is that you can really punish or incentivize a human and to follow those routes, those paths, and this is all symbolic construction. So the incentives are, as symbolically constructed as the path. So like outside of that system there would be no path. It's not like it's just narrated. And the same about the awards. Like when you take getting more and more money as an incentive, it only makes sense within the system. So because there are paths that money, that you can get more and more money, so it's like, reinforcing each other in two ways. This is why you want to get this money. And I think incentives in those systems are much more important than the punishments, because, for example, if you take the economy, it's you don't have to really have the punishment. It's just that in order to take an action, you need money. So in order to stay in the game, you have to act to get those money, because so like being outside of the system is and like losing all what is normally an incentive and having nothing to play with anymore is actually the punishment. So like you either walk and do and get the stuff, or you are out of the system and you don't mess with the past. Like you are not part of it. Like, for example, in academia, you publish, present, discuss, and so on, and you are part of that system, or you don't, and you are not part of that system.
It's the peril part. The publishing part.
Yeah.
Perish.
Yeah.
Funny, that just to demonstrate how universal it is what you're talking about, there's a really nice documentary on Vice's YouTube channel of a Japanese man who went off to an island to live by himself and he's been there for 20 years, and he doesn't eat. Like, he eats as minimally as he can. Like, he's trained his entire body. Like, he eats super minimally. He even exerts super minimal energy. And yet every month his sister back in Japan has to send him something like $100 to $150, or the equivalent of $100 to $150, so he can buy basic provisions, etc., to live. But he's minimally existing in the most isolated state possible, and he still needs money.
You need to have that.
There's no escape, even if you go to the edge.
Yeah. But this is really, like, from the social systems perspective of the economy, is really excellent achievement. Like totalizing of the entire all actions that are there. Like are kind of immersed in the economy. I think it's the biggest achievement of social systems, in terms of their distributedness and propagation. So getting the incentive of going through the right path, or being punished by not getting, just by not getting the incentives, also maps, obviously into the paleo-human and pre-historical human. You either get this zebra leg and you eat, or you don't, and then you are out of the game as well, eventually. So you have to continue doing those things that will give you food. But this is it, and there's more and more, in my view, sophisticated ways social systems proceed that human computation, to my knowledge, isn't yet very good at. How do you present this reality? How do you insert this reality consisting of the paths and incentives that are arbitrary and symbolic into the experience of a human? I called it here portals in the landscape. You have a reality, and then you consider this particular system, either small or just all-encompassing, like economy, to be as real and as valid part of your reality, or even more real than the landscape you are in, for example, the grass and wood. How do you add the landscape of the system into the landscape of the person? And this is something that Luhmann describes as self-description of the system, which of the social system, which narrates why it's there and how it links to to other systems that are there, and why it's important, and so on. So, and I think human computation projects, this is the weak point. Why would a person enter to this domain? It's kind of...
Well, in games, there is a lot of use of narratives. It's one of the principles of gamification that is, what was it called? Epic meaning or something like that. You create kind of an epic explanation, like you're not just shooting at dots on the screen, no, you're saving the earth from spatial invaders.
True,
so you create a narrative that explains what you are doing as if it's something important and big to create.
Yes, but you say as if, and like social systems now don't have this, as if, like they don't have those portals that you can see, like you are entering just for fun, for a while to have fun, and this is a gamification. I'll go there, play, and this is my real life. And social systems don't do it. Like you, of course, in a sense, yes. Like you enter science, you start, being like working in a new organization, join corporation, and so on. But they are all, they are all part of the landscape, which is real and even more real and existentially as important to the human already as just getting basic stuff, food, and connecting to some friends, the like biological social needs and so on. So, but of course, yes, this narrative of the story of something that motivates and engages, this is exactly the portal to some kind of this kind of a project of human computation.
I don't quite understand why you use the term portal.
I see it like entering into the system.
Mm-hmm. But what you're already in the system, it's more like giving you a view on the system that makes it more motivating to be part of it.
But you are not in all systems, and you can enter them. Like, for example, you can start working for business, and you don't. So, like, okay, there is a description of the system, a narrative about it, but you are like not in it. You see it from the distance. And when you are in it, you start to communicate in a certain way, get some incentives that, like, normally when you are outside don't seem important and motivating. You don't want to contribute this particular actions to.
I understand what you mean, but I don't think we have the right term yet. I think that neither narrative nor portal captures what you're trying to say. It's more like creating a kind of narrative meaning so that you feel part of it, that you feel part of the adventure of participating in the system.
You mentioned the self-description. In what sense social system have self-description? They have a description, but self-description also implies a certain kind of subjectivity.
Not necessarily. If if a social system consists of occurrences of communication, and this is like self, so this kind of itself, then communication, occurrences of communication, like within this set that describe the system and why it's there, and so on, are the self-description. So, for Luhmann, the boundary of a social system is created via those kind of communications about itself, including the name of the system. We start a new organization.
We the people. This is how it starts. But the thing is it's a subtlety about whether all this idea of a social system. I have a lot of questions. Maybe I will leave it to the end because there are a few ideas that I want to connect, perhaps.
Okay. For me, those three types of communication, communications that are happening as a system, like as a part of the system. Communications about like what kind of like labels about good and bad contribution to the system, different kinds of incentives, and communication about the system itself. Create introduce some kind of augmentation to the human reality. Before some kind of a system exists, there's no this dimension of reality, and then a system self-organizes. For example, a system of legal system, and then that there is this dimension of the reality that changes a lot in your reality. And it does have a name, it does have a self-description, it gives incentives and punishments, it's kind of charts what you are supposed to do to maintain the system. What kind of actions do organize the system?
One way to define what is reality is the system of distinctions, the thing that you distinguish as being there. Of course, that's a system of distinction that's different from your previous system of distinction, so it's kind of a new reality. And I think that's in part what the sociologists mean when they speak about the social construction of reality. It's a vague term, so this is potentially more precise. It's an autopoietic system of distinctions that creates a reality that wasn't there before, because before you didn't have those distinctions, and you didn't have those connections between distinctions and those incentives and so on.
Mm-hmm. And the next step, still, if a system is made of narratives and communication, then this next step is also of this substance, kind of connects the human to the system. Because, why would you take part in it? Why would you enter? So what each social system produces is a narrative of you. A social role or persona, the old identity. But identity is still probably may be understood closer. Like, how do you combine all your social roles within you? Maybe then the construct that system creates. You are either a customer, and then when you connect your persona to that portal, you have a different types of distinction in it, like what you can do, what kind of actions, what kind of incentives you get. Or you are entrepreneur in the same system, and you have completely different set of things to do and want and not want. If you are a scientist, there is a system of science, and you can just read it what's there in a journal, but you can enter it as a scientist, or as an administrator or somebody else. So the way you are, and it's not you, it's a narrative of you described by the system, the role.
Maybe it's a kind of an interface between you and the system of distinctions. Which are the distinctions that I can influence or that I need to take into account in order to perform which actions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's still a construct of the system. New system appears.
Maybe you could connect it to my concept of an agent as a bundle of condition-action rules. Conditions and actions are distinctions. Connections between condition and actions are connections. These are generated by the system, but each role in the system will have access to different condition-action rules. Like, for example, if you are the boss of the factory, you will have access to different condition-action rules than if you are a worker in the factory. The worker in the factory can screw this thing onto that thing, or can move that part onto that part, while the boss can decide how many cars need to be made by that date. They have a different interface to the system, which means that they have different condition-action rules that they can implement, that they can instantiate.
I think the condition-action rules are really connectors between incentives and paths. And also paths. If you do something, then you do something. If you do something, then you get a bonus. And in general, you get a separate bundle for each role.
I want to understand better the role of humans in this. If the role of a person in relation to the social system is a kind of a bunch of distinctions and condition action rules, it seems that, at least by a kind of a thought experiment, I can replace every single human agent who is facilitating the existence of a social system with a computer script. Suppose we have a robot or just a computer that says, okay, now I build a program that behaves like a customer. Now I build a program that behaves like a boss, just specifying and programming all the condition rules. And then we take a social system and we have this bunch of automated behavioral agents operating and interacting with each other. Would you say it is the social system in the sense that you relate to kingdoms, states, banks?
Yes.
So we are actually superfluous. The fact that humans are involved is really...
No, except that the conditions and the actions tend to be fuzzy and context dependent, and it's much difficult to
there is a fuzzy
formalize
logic today, and you can create a...
No.
So
Formalizing distinction is much more difficult than scientists.
So Francis, so you introduce here a kind of a mysterious element that does not exist in condition action rules.
No, it does.
Yes,
Let's say that we say that you are my agent at an auction, and I tell you if the painting that comes up is beautiful, you buy it. Condition action. I can't delegate it to a computer because it wouldn't know what a beautiful painting is.
So there is a mysterious element called beauty, without which social system,
but it's difficult to formalize.
social system cannot exist. So there is something in the life of social systems that depends on the lives of all the small components, and maybe there is nothing over and above this.
You know, if it's a social system of arts, okay, like understand, recognizing beauty, like, okay, but for me, it's not that we are we cannot be replaced in social systems. If the field or artificial intelligence, which is a social system, creates what it wants to create, then, of course, there will be more and more processors which will be much more useful, much more trainable. You don't have to create portals with adventures for them and so on. You just, program them. So, and this kind of social system will be new social system. And when you talk about autonomous organization, this is this kind of.
Yes, autonomous organization are pretty close to this. But what I try to understand, and I think it's something very basic to all the ideas that you present, is whether a social system is an entity with a certain. Of course, we spoke about autonomy, we spoke about cognition even. Mm-hmm. Whether it is an entity or an agency in itself, or is it something that we project into a certain set of processes and relations, because it's easier for us to understand it. So, you see what I mean?
Yeah. If it's a metaphor or
yes, because if I subtract from the human everything but the behaviorism, so I subtract the reflective powers and the abstraction and things like this to a certain extent, would we still have a social system? You say yes, and Francis say something not exactly yes, because there are certain aspects that are fuzzy or cannot be programmed. I tend to agree to this, but
to me, it's like at this moment, except for those autonomous organizations, they're not that powerful. Of course, it's critically dependent on this particular processor, which is our mind, and it emerged of its activity, and it then started to manipulate and influence the environment in the way that like the system is being strengthened and the human is just being fragmented into roles to fit to it. Then social systems, envision different types of artificial agencies.
Yes.
So I think like evolutionary thinking and the pace of evolution, those creatures are very fast compared to humans. I think this is going in this direction.
Yeah, we have this this idea about the behavioral conditioning, that you nudge a certain agent to do this by incentives and punishments. But there is, and this is something that you could program. More difficult, less difficult, but in principle you could program it. There is some additional element, it has to do with intention that human agents have. And I think that something in the agency of the social system arises with recruiting or mastering this kind of intention as a force, which is not something which is given in behavioral systems. I think that if you relate to a human or a person, a human agent, only as a behavioral system, with no intention that can somehow...
It's something that just follows condition action rules.
Yes, if it just follows condition action rules, you will not get what we understand nowadays as a social system. There is a kind of an additional element or a force which has to do with intention. It's not that I nudge you. It's not that I nudge you to buy this product or that product, and by that you facilitate the existence of the bigger system. It is the idea that we cannot know what you will do. It's like a force that you can recruit, but it's not a given.
And two people are not as easily programmable in the sense, and that has to do with this complexity, context-dependent fuzziness, etc. You don't know exactly which decisions they will make. So, in what seemingly may be the same conditions, they may make different.
And because I
different
don't
decisions, know, and yeah.
Suppose I offer you, let's go for a coffee. But I don't know if you will agree or not. But if you will agree, I gain something to my self-reflection of existence, and the same thing if you don't, even if you don't agree. So this transaction does something. It does something that reinforces a certain kind of I don't know even how to call it. I'm just speaking my thoughts. It needs to be somehow captured by
there's still the autonomy of the human beings in the sense that they have their own value system. And what the creature or the semiosphere is doing is trying to recruit that value system by giving incentives. That means things that, according to your value system, you find attractive enough so that you are willing to do certain actions. So it creates kind of condition action rules in you by recruiting these values that you have.
Yes,
And while you may independently, autonomously decide whether is that incentive enough for me to do that action or not, in the end, seen from the outside, if the system is smart enough, it will make you do whatever it wants you to do. So you are autonomous in one sense, but you are programmed in the other sense.
Exactly, and I think that the autonomy of the agents is necessary for the overall system to work. And because if you replace an agent which is autonomous but conditioned with a computer program that does exactly the same, you will not get somehow you don't get the same power. But
you don't, of course, you
I
don't
think
get
the
the same
power has less to do with
quality.
the autonomy and more to do with this kind of fuzzy decision making. It's much more than fuzzy decision making, but it's kind of intuitive, context dependent, taking into account all kind of factors that you can't formalize easily in a computer. computer.
I try to isolate the factor that makes it more interesting than just an algorithm.
Because it's an old mathematical result which I regularly repeat in my papers, and that most people wouldn't understand it. That is that there is no strict difference between a goal-directed system, that means a system that tries to optimize some value, and a deterministic system, that means a system that just follows condition action rules. Mathematically, you can describe the one as being the other and vice versa. So that means if an agent is predictably optimizing certain values, then you can use that to program that agent to predictably perform certain actions. So whether it has inbuilt condition action rules that are always the same, or whether it predictably tries to optimize its utility function, which is always the same, the net effect is the same. It will do what you want it to do if you give it the right incentive.
And of course, like when you think about it, there are two intelligences and two kind of, because human intelligence and consciousness is attached to it, so we see it from this perspective. And of course, if we remove it, we don't witness it. We are not in it, so it has a different quality. But from the perspective of the processes that maintain this creature, they can go on, just without the effect on our consciousness, the impact that it makes on us. So like two kinds of intelligences combined.
It's like if I'm trying to think of a social system, all the agents that are around me represent a certain kind of chaos or disorder, which is full of energy, and what I try to do is to do some work, meaning to create a direction and to recruit some of this energy in order to direct it into a certain
that's what I call mobilization.
direction. Yeah.
And of course it sounds like intentionality, consciousness of the system, but it's a sense of evolutionary selective pressures that, like you say that, like the flower wants to get sun. It wants to get it because like it looks like it's selected because it works this way. It's self-organization.
Mobilization is the elicitation of energy that's inside the system in such a way that it is focused and coordinated. So you mobilize people to do something.
But
You're using the energy they have, but you make them put that energy together instead of in a dissipative way with lots of friction. You put them in a focused way where they reinforce each other.
But actually, you have a kind of a container of free energy, and you try to direct it by putting constraints. So these things that Marta is mentioning are kind of putting constraints in order to exploit free energy.
Exactly. But the constraints
to a certain direction.
The constraints can actually be quite minimal. The example I always give is in the traffic rules we have a very simple constraint, which is that you should drive on the right-hand side of the road. It's a limitation of your freedom, but it's a minimal limitation. But without that limitation, people would drive just on any side of the road. Traffic would be impossible. So there would be a lot of friction, and that friction is stopped simply by having a rule: drive on the right-hand side of the road.
Yeah, of course, even having a road is already a constraint, yes.
What about social hierarchy here? I think the agenda, the goal is to increase their position in social.
For me, social hierarchy is just one way of organizing those paths. So if the system is like hierarchy maintaining communications, then the behavioral actions that are supposed to maintain the system are just obeying the hierarchy. So it's like a different plan that what I'm saying here is the way the system is self-organized, hierarchical or not. It can be like when it's a monarchy, then your participation in the system would be like giving, ruling the country if you are the king, so giving this kind of communications, or just obeying the orders if you are not the king, right? So this sense, like in this sense, like this can be organized differently. You are supposed to do different things in different systems. And of course, like hierarchical system for humans is completely different experience than like a social movement, which is flat and self-organizing from human perspective. But it's still, you know, some kind of organization of distinctions, which you follow if you are a part of that system.
Yeah, differentiation and modularization is just one step before hierarchy, and I don't see how any system can create what you said as boundaries, autopoiesis, direction, narrative, etc., without some kind of differentiation.
It must be a very small,
differentiation doesn't imply hierarchy.
newly born, system that is just starting, has flat organization, a lot of flexibility and so on, like startups, and then you grow and like hierarchical system will have definitely much more like those personas and roles that come with completely different sets of actions, as opposed to more flat organizations. But what you, Francis, said about how the system has to map onto like this persona onto your value system, or onto a human value system, is my next step, because like it's getting closer and closer to the human. So when you create a persona of a scientist or a consumer or a king, then it's still narrative based, that you like in this system narrate also the theory of mind of this persona. So you need a manual, like how am I supposed to feel here? Like what am I supposed to want and like, and of course, if it doesn't map onto my psychological organization, I won't fit into that role, into that persona. But if it does, then I can like, okay, this is me. So like this is very powerfully experienced when you change your persona. You have new role in the society, and then like you see it touches different parts of your psyche, so to speak, and mobilizes it and addresses different needs than like another role. And we have many different roles simultaneously. But for example, like the one of the most successful in terms of recruitment system, like for example, Christian religion that was spreading in medieval times, it had a very, very interesting theory of mind, like how mapping, coupling of the persona and human psychology, because it was calling and touching all those things that were in this primitive human, and just like calling them, addressing them, naming them, and asking to abandon them. So it was the human beast inside of you that you are supposed to transcend into being a Christian, right? So all desires and needs and sinful thoughts and so on that you experience in yourself were labeled, and say, aha, this is what we are getting rid of, and you become the persona, the saint, and you go to heaven and so on. So like it was mapped, but it was mapped in a very antagonistic way. So you have to abandon. And for example, economy has done much more sustainable trick, because it has mapped onto those urges, those drives, and those desires without asking people to change them. So like you want to gather and you want to hunt, right? So okay, this is money, gather them and hunt for as an entrepreneur for a big animal. You want to impress other people, okay, you can do it with money, right? You want to organize and have an adventure, you can do it with money. So it's really, it doesn't antagonize those needs, it just uses them and maps them into the persona. Yes, this is how you do it. But every persona, every system will touch different parts of the human psyche. And since we are hosting many different roles, they map differently. And this is where those modalities really coexist or interplay. The narrated theory of what you are supposed to do, to feel, to value in the system, and what are your real needs. So you experience those needs, you have this story, and you see and you feel it works together or not.
By theory of mind, you mean that the social system has some kind of a model of the minds of its individual components and uses that model to map it onto the persona so as to better make people feel at home in their persona?
But it doesn't store it anywhere else than everything what it has in communication. So it just narrates like how it is to be a scientist.
The theory of mind, I think the simplest model of theory of mind is the so-called BDI framework, beliefs, desires, intentions. It means people's mind is reduced to a collection of things they believe, things they desire, and then the intention, that means the concrete next steps they will do given their beliefs and their desires to realize their desires. So if you have, yes, BDI, so if you have some kind of a theory like people have desires for sex or desires for wealth or desires for that, you can say some of these desires you want to suppress, some of these desires you want to maybe promote, and you put certain beliefs into them so that these beliefs together with the desires will lead to certain intentions, which are then the elements of the persona, namely the actions people want to take. So, yeah. You could almost make a formal model of that.
Yeah, but the social system doesn't really have to have a theory of mind. It just can
I wouldn't say it's a theory, it's not really a theory, but it has a kind of a representation of the mind that's implicit. So,
I don't think that it's not that if you look at the mirror, you see something. The mirror doesn't have to have any prior knowledge in order to reflect how you look. If the mirror is a little bit distorted, it will take the information in your shape and will give you back some kind of reflection which is distorted. So in this sense, I think the social system does something like a mirror. It is reflecting aspects. By distorting our theory of mind, it's a kind of reflecting to us back what we should be in relation to it.
In the like human side of the coupling, in the experience of the human, but it like since this is all communication, it
Yes.
speaks about it. Like you hear how it is to be a scientist, and why do you want to be a scientist, and why people do that, and you read it. Like when you enter a new role that you have no clue what it is about, you just read or listen, to other people saying that, oh, this is like, you do that because this is fun. You don't do that. For example, Francis just wrote a description how it, like what does it mean to be a scientist? Like you do that and you do that and you like this, but you don't like this. You don't like writing proposals because it's feeling in charge. So like this is the description of how the person feels. And of course, like if you don't recognize yourself in it, you maybe not won't enter this portal, but you recognize, okay, this is something you do. And for example, if you become an entrepreneur, you'll read all those stories how Steve Jobs, lost all his money, but then there's like and some traits of psychology are highlighted and valued, and you recognize them in your. So this is why I'm saying this is like a theory of the mind of a human from the system's perspective. How, what makes them tick? What are the pulls? Yeah.
No, but I think I understand better now why you use the theory of mind here. It's because theory of mind as a concept was invented to describe how people learn to manipulate other people, because they have a theory of the mind of that other person. They know what that person desires, they know what that person believes, they therefore can guess what their intentions will be, and therefore they can predict how they will behave, and if necessary manipulate that behavior by, for example, changing their beliefs.
And the question
And
is,
that is what the social system is also doing. It's changing their beliefs. I mean, to put it simple, let's say that the desires are kind of inbuilt. The beliefs are things that depend on the information you get. If somebody tells you there is a line outside, don't go there, and you believe that, it will change your behavior because your desire is not to be eaten by a lion, therefore you will take a different exit. So by manipulating the beliefs, you can change the intentions, and the intentions is what leads to the actions. And that's what, after all, what you want to manipulate, it's the actions.
Yeah. And I think also in the theory of mind, there's this component of projecting some mind that, like, from inside. You have your mind. That's why it allows you to have a theory of mind of another. If you are not this modality, you won't have this theory. So you have your theory is kind of part of your own organization. And of course, it's like you are learning, modifying, making it more and more accurate, but it's still your creation. So in this way, this is a need of social system mapped onto the mental system and how it operates.
Then it's kind of difficult to say that the social system has a theory of mind because it doesn't have a mind of its own in the traditional sense. Or does it?
But it has its organization, so it knows what, and each is different, so each one's different kind of desires, want to employ different kinds. So it will highlight those. And in this sense, it's a bit of projection, because it's not like it tries to map a real human, it tries to find what it needs into this mental landscape. So.
Yeah, it was maybe a little bit too simplistic when I said that you can manipulate the beliefs but not the desires. You can manipulate the desires by simply highlighting some I can be hungry and thirsty at the same time, but if you put a glass of cold water that looks very fresh in front of me, I will forget about my hunger and my thirst will be kind of activated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Almost the last one, I'm not sure about this name also, the way we are moving more and more into the human mind, we're almost leaving the symbol processing sphere, how a mind integrates all those roles into an mental organization that is sustained by mental processes. To me, it overlaps with the concept of ego as a kind of representation of the self held in the mental system, but somehow it can we all know it can grow, and also the bigger role is implemented to it, and it integrates this role, the ego becomes bigger, so it's getting more metaphorical, but what I want to say is that this is a mentally held representation that is somehow combining all those roles and narrating about the self. And I think that there's it's okay.
But now you're speaking about the individual human.
Yes.
Not the social system.
Yes. It's already into the human. So how do you introject and still maintain the self of some kind of coherency within you? I think it's kind of a narrative structure still, but it's not just in words, it's in thoughts. But if you it can be nicely experienced if you experience being pinched in your ego, you know the feeling.
I was just having an image of being pinched in a very different part of your being.
Okay, maybe, but for me it's okay, you instantly start to produce thoughts and words and explanations and narratives just to heal this wound, it's very, very fast, and then when it's coherent again, you are okay, you can relax. So it's kind of the same way as producing more and more blood cells to maintain the organization, to heal the.
You know that two things that came up with this is there is a kind of a symmetry on this axis that you draw, and ego stands in symmetry to punishment and incentives, which is interesting. And this is one thought. Another thought, which is not entirely coherent with the first one, is that the ego represents actually also a social system, but inside the biological agent.
So you mean the society of the mind?
Yes, because also as a biological system we have a lot of incentives, a lot of things to do. This end wants to go there, that end wants to go there, and sometimes you feel like this, you feel like that, and there is a mess. And the ego is like a social system with acts of communication between the different aspects of the mind or the brain, create a semi of a coherent entity, that operates in the world. And there is, of course, this biological integrity that is involved, but anyway, like it's like one side of the axis reflects the other.
Both, intelligent, complex systems.
Yes, and also with
couple
conversation with you about Luhmann. I didn't read Luhmann myself, but it seems always he was occupied with the idea of reflection, of things reflecting other things. Well, there is no one point that you can single out. There are always, these are acts of communications that are actually reflecting elements, one upon the other, with no single element becoming conglomerated or objectively defined.
So in the sense, like there is no substance other than like action, like of relating, of this, of reflecting, relating, and there's all processes, action, things.
When I hear ego, I think about the theory of Freud that the ego is kind of the compromise between the it and the superego, where the superego represents the social system and the it represents, let's say, your biological nature. So would that fit also?
I think so, except that like in the functionally differentiated society, you have many the super egos which are different systems. It's not the one coherent super ego like, introjected.
You mean like the persona, the different personas?
You know that it makes a lot of sense because it can represent the free energy of the system, and the superego can represent a kind of a narrative or direction, and the ego is a kind of putting them together somehow. It's not always brilliant, but it goes somewhere. So this parallel is kind of interesting.
And the last trick of social systems I was able to identify is that it happens to other people as well. And humans, those, again, biological humans are a social species. And here I speak social in a biological sense. So what matters when you are not hungry anymore, not thirsty anymore, you have enough sleep and you are not in danger, like your universe consists of other people. And this is like the most important dimension of the world. So the fact that this reality, you enter there, you are participating, and you see other people participating as well, makes a human motivated to be there. But the interesting part is that the system already mediates between them. So it's like this is the powerful observer of a different modality, of another human who like sees how you are doing within the system, how your ego and your persona operates there, and like evaluates how you are doing there, and also like when you are being perceived by another human in a way which is mediated by a social system, simultaneously you perceive all other people in a mediated way as well. So in a like prehistorical, before the creatures were created, you could see a human, and then when you like the space between you and some other person is occupied by this distinction hierarchical organization of a monarchy, for example, you see a king. And this is completely different creature than a human, right? It's a king. So in this sense, you relate differently and so on. And again, in the reality of multiple roles, multiple systems, and so on, you like every space between two humans is mediated by many different systems of that sort. So that was an attempt to answer the question how the social system does it. I think when because in our project at the Global Brain Institute we are busy with like, designing, introducing or introducing a big change into how social systems organize and what is the impact on a human. I think we should when we are speaking about our solutions that we have in mind, it would be good to see it at like how the system function in all those stages, because this is the coupling. So I think that might be useful. Also, we speak a lot about emancipation or liberation of a human from those coercive influences of social systems. So in this context, I think there are like two different types of liberation. One, and the only one which can be achieved by a social system, which is a theory or a like institute or a scientific field or something like that, is actually the like different way of coupling with the human. What we want to do with the Global Brain project, we want to, probably we can phrase it like that, we want to construct a better interface with the human so that there will be no friction, the human would be represented or could feel relaxed and be present, not forced into the persona and just, coerced to certain types of actions, but totally understood and then left free to do whatever is, follows from the person's desires and so on. But simultaneously, of course, it will be still the social system, So here, I think that here lies this sometimes experienced and voiced uneasiness about the whole idea. Like, how do we want to include humans so totally in the new level of organization that there will be really no way out, because the person will be mapped so well and so totally that won't even experience the difference between the self and the system anymore. So the coupling will be completely tight,
That will be a true Metasystem transition.
Yeah. And I think this is something that it's not, you can debate it if it sounds good to a human or not. But I think when we are talking completely understanding, completely enabling everything that the human wants, and nudging, but still freedom, and so on. So Trioban was speaking about it last time when a social system is experienced as not very pleasant place to be, it's much easier to differentiate yourself from it. So you see that this is a social role I'm playing, but me, it's somebody a bit farther from that portal. But if it's totally mapped, maybe that there will be no way out. And another way of liberation is just...
just comment on that? I think about the example, it's a classical example that let's say, the older religious systems were very much suppressing sexual desires. Like you were not supposed to have sex outside of marriage, and everything was taboo. Well, in the 60s there was a kind of an emancipation, partly because of a changing culture, partly because of the availability of anti-conception, where suddenly sex became something that you could do freely. If you liked somebody, you could have sex with them. Of course, there were some exaggerations, there were some side effects where they went too far, but it was a very big liberation of the human spirit, in the sense that before all the sexual desires that had been suppressed now kind of could be expressed in a more natural way without endangering the social system. Because the previous social system was somehow, for reasons that I only partially understand, it was kind of seen that sexual desire should be repressed except in very specific circumstances, but that was kind of liberated, and the social system could function again. And that was, I think, Jan Bernheim used to give that as an example, because he's a bit older than me, so he has more kind of consciously experienced liberation, and he was giving that as an example that people nowadays are actually much happier than before, when they constantly were wondering, am I not committing a sin by doing this or that, or by looking at this sexy woman there, and I shouldn't be, and
yeah, absolutely, and of course, like what we want to do is like enable, like freedom of expression and so on. I'm just about this is just a question, little question mark in it. Like if a social system is like so well coupled with the human psyche, will still be like an experience of like entering a different modality when you are in language, or it will be just. And maybe I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. Just you can experience yourself, because this is the second way of liberating, not via like liberal social system, but just by like withdrawing from caring about your person, and you can do it from within. And in this sense, like when we sometimes say this is only you who can liberate yourself, like from this part of the spectrum, like when in the psychological modality, of course, this is only the mental system, the psychological system that can withdraw, like ignore the portal, not enter it, or like use it instrumentally and then go back and eventually get enlightened and drop the ego.
Indoctrination falls in that category also.
Because like everything that you can narrate can becomes a social system. So like you have an experience of like dropping of ego and being totally transcended, and then you start speaking about it, and it's not like it's a different modality. So like if people follow, it's just a social system. Also like and you have a religion.
I think one thing to point out is that is the function of all social systems to mediate between humans, and I think it's interesting about the second kind of liberation that you mentioned, ignoring the portals, rejecting projections, dropping the ego.
Explain the enlightenment.
This is a kind of an enlightenment, but according to what you do before, the axis that you do before, it means that this process, if accomplished, will expose a problem. And the problem is called the other human. How do you relate to another human without the mediation of any social system whatsoever?
I think it is much easier than you think.
I didn't say it's easier or not easier, and I'm not sure it's that easier as it's. I don't know.
It will not be easy in this state, because suppose that you are enlightened and the others are not enlightened, you will have quite a difficulty. But suppose that everybody is enlightened, I think most of these problems will resolve themselves.
We don't know, we haven't been there. But in this sense, this kind of liberation actually opens a new kind of universe, a psychological universe. How do you exist with the other, which is also you, but different.
Yeah.
And with all the intention and the desires and the directions and the narratives, etc., are just not conditioned anymore to respond in a certain manner. So you cannot expect. You have to relate to the other with completely different set of tools.
So like tools and masters meet together, and how do they relate to each other? But to me,
The problem, so I can speak a little bit about experience, is that if you're enlightened, that means that you reject all these boundaries, these conditions. But then if somebody else still sticks to these boundaries and conditions, and you transgress these boundaries, then they will feel uncomfortable with you.
Yes, I agree.
And then the question is, what do? You can compromise and saying, okay, with those people I know that I should be careful. And won't transgress boundaries when
But
they
why
are
should you be
there.
careful?
On the other hand, you could say maybe by carefully transgressing these boundaries, they will learn themselves that these boundaries are not as absolute as they think they are, and you may enlighten them.
and here we come to that grammatical construction that can you liberate a person, as opposed to like this is so.
Why not?
I think you can from the first part, like you the constructing the social system that way that accommodates, but not like you cannot drop somebody's ego, right?
You can give them a different role model. You can give them a different role model. I think most of these people follow what the social system says because they only know not the portals, but the personas that their social system has offered. They may not feel very happy with it, but they don't have a choice because they don't see any others. If you now show them a completely different persona that actually functions pretty well, then they say, actually, maybe I could also be like that.
Okay, but this is still constructing a social system, nudging to a different kind of, like by example, different kind of action.
Well, maybe not persona, but a role model of somebody who is liberated is very useful. I mean, it's very well known in all cases of emancipation, racial discrimination, women's emancipation, that if you see an emancipated woman, while you have always been a woman who thought that you didn't have any right and you couldn't do anything yourself, but suddenly you think, yeah, actually maybe I could also be a Nobel Prize in chemistry, or I could be the head of a big company, or I could be president of the US.
Yeah, and also this example, learning from an example, like when you have a master and a disciple, and the Zen master just, makes the other one sit and wait for them. I don't know. This is kind of.
It's interesting that in the history of Buddhism in China, there was a famous split between what is called the Northern School and the Southern School. The Northern School was the school of gradual enlightenment, which is more or less constructing an ever better interfaces, etc., and know how to make the least friction with life, etc. The second school was the school of sudden enlightenment that professed that there is no method whatsoever in the process of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is, at least in the Buddhist tradition, and that then went into Japan. This distinction is still there. There is sudden enlightenment and gradual enlightenment, and they have completely different ways of how to look at this. And it's,
well, as usual, I think it's a combination of the two that will be most effective.
And I also think that those two ways of liberating are kind of, progressing geographically from two sides, of the globe. So like you have the Eastern internal liberation from otherwise, strict social system. You have the Western type of liberation via culture, via socio-technological systems, and they are like changing and manipulation. So if they meet in the middle, I will be happy.
I'm not sure that
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
possible.
maybe the top one is the Western one and the bottom one is the Eastern one.
Where's the meeting point? Geography.
No, but it's by Russia where I would want to be, or in Afghanistan, or
Who knows what will
the
happen?
problem is that the in between is not very
You said that combination is the best. Okay, so I think it's good.
It's a pity that Thorben couldn't be here. I think she would have Oh, we have some more general comments. Well, we should definitely discuss about the mediator evolution scenario because it's a different way from Luhmann, but I think it probably matches some of the same ideas, but using different concepts and methods and merging the two may give us a better model. I speak about aspect systems. So an aspect is not a subsystem in the sense that you take a bunch of agents and then you separate some agents out of them. You take all agents, but those agents have certain what you might call modalities, certain aspects that can be organized in a certain way and that are relatively independent of different aspects. Like in society you could have the linguistic aspect and the cultural aspect and the political aspect and the economic aspect. And those can evolve relatively independently, not completely independently. And such an aspect can then evolve from a medium, that means something along which the agents can interact, to a mediator, which moreover coordinates the interaction, to a manager, which becomes a goal-directed system, which makes the agent behave in certain ways. And then you get what you call a social system that kind of manipulates or exploits the agents. Not necessarily for bad purposes, but in the first place to keep itself alive.
Those aspect systems, Luhmann calls them functional, functional differentiation systems.
Yeah. Functional is pretty similar. We have structural differentiation of subsystems, functional differentiation aspect systems. It's a terminology from systems theory, but that's very few people use the aspect system. I liked it. I didn't invent it, it was in other systems theories, but not many people seem to have adopted the terminology.
I think I like the aspect word better than functional, because functional brings,
Functional gives
the
you the impression that it is already
Yeah,
purposeful.
yeah.
Well, an aspect is
just,
something in which you can vary, but that is
Like a
relatively
dimension
independent of
also.
other aspects in which you can vary. It's more kind of like degrees of freedom. Well, actually, it's non-intuitive, but mathematically there is no strict separation between subsystems and aspect systems in the sense that if you put all components together in a state space, you take the Cartesian product of all the state spaces, and now you have something with many different dimensions or degrees of freedom, and some of these degrees of freedom will correspond to separate agents. Some of these degrees of freedom will correspond to different aspects of the agents. They're after all just degrees of freedom. And some of these degrees of freedom are strongly coupled to other degrees of freedom. Some of them are relatively independent. And when they're relatively independent, they can evolve to create some kind of an autopoietic system without affecting too much the other aspects.
So it's a kind of choice of coordinate system. You can you can choose different coordinate systems like moving between time description and frequency domain
For
description.
example, or like how do they call it, the angular coordinates versus the Cartesian coordinates. And depending on the system, the angular coordinates can be independent or vice versa.
If I'm not grasping fully in here, if I read Emancipation, I would assume this is from the perspective of the ego. But then the second bullet, I understand, but the first one looks like it's rather the social system.
Because you have those emancipatory social systems. So like the word itself is like, you know. Yeah. So, but yes, it is coming like from expression of, you know, like not being represented as an ego in a social system, wanting a change, and then like any communication, it can self-organize into the social system.
And it's often the technology that creates the interface, like the example I gave about anti-conception. That's a technology that's liberated people's sexual desires because now they could have sex without being afraid of pregnancy. That made a very big difference.
Yeah, this is like narrative. Like the first one is narrative liberation of the end.
Okay.
But it's still a system. So like if you liberate to the extent that the ego could feel completely relaxed, the system is like there forever, you know, because there will be no need to like pull out.
Yeah, you know, the next step will be to eliminate pregnancy altogether. And then if human females will not have to be pregnant.
You mean like test tube babies that really go to babies?
Yes, test tube baby really going to baby outside of the body.
Women won't be burdened by pregnancy forever.
No?
Women will eventually be emancipated from pregnancy.
Well, I somehow think it will take longer than we would like to.
I'm
It's
just saying.
not an obvious thing to go a baby outside of the womb.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it'll happen.
I have a friend who is a gynecologist. So she told me that most of the people are thinking wrongly about it. It's not about making a baby outside the body from conception to birth, but going backward. And going backward meaning from which week in pregnancy the baby is viable and can go and become a normal person with no problem.
That means you take the embryo out at a certain amount and go without.
Yes, because it happens all the time in hospitals that there is a premature birth and usually...
yeah, but it's not quite the kind of babies you like to. But yeah,
no,
but maybe it's indeed not difficult because what you essentially need is a stream of blood. Now I don't know whether you can have the equivalent of mother's blood that is as nutritive.
The technology quite advanced in the last century. So now even a baby born at the six months, a little bit more.
I know, but these are other aspects. I mean,
so
you don't really want to have a baby at 6 months already outside of the womb. It will survive, but it will not go as nicely as one that stays for 9 months in the womb.
Today it's quite.
No, I would like to see the statistics about the same babies 30 years later. I'm pretty sure that you would find that IQ, health, etc. will be lower than the ones that have grown up to 9 months. Okay, are we going for a beer?